Good morning. Happy Wednesday. Welcome back. We're exploring church and state this week. And we're going to go to a passage that has been much talked about. I'm sure it will certainly be in that ELCA statement. Romans chapter 13. Luther himself actually wrote on this passage. And it's interesting. Luther, I'll tell you what Luther wrote. At the end of the Small Catechism, he has a section about what subjects owe their magistrates, right? Yes, you should render tribute, so taxes, custom, fear or respect, as Luther would use it, honor, right? But there is this understanding of coming from Romans 13, our subject from today, which actually Romans 13 clearly builds on Jesus saying, give to Caesar what Caesar's, which was yesterday. This is a conversation that's happening. People are living in this Roman Empire and going, okay, if I'm a Christian, I'm living a new life. Am I a Roman now? Or still not Roman, but still living in this empire? Should we do something about this empire? I mean, the fanatics, the zealots certainly would say yes, right? So which way do we follow? There's no doubt teachers in the church at this point that want to overthrow Rome, want to resist Rome, want to work with Rome. It's the whole gambit, and this is Paul's answer. Right. Let's just read verse 1, 13 verse 1. Let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those authorities that exist that have been instituted by God. So right there Paul's saying, God's still the highest authority, but we need to survive. So he's writing to the Romans. An uprising against Rome is not going to go well. The mission's too important, as Paul will continue to write. He also makes the argument, if you are breaking the law, that's a problem, right? We're called to live in a higher life, right? For rulers are not a terror to the good conduct, but to bad. Do you wish to have no fear of authority? Then do what is good, for you will receive its approval. For it is God's servant for your good. So yes, Paul's saying that God can call people to govern. That's a calling, like anything else we believe God calls. We have laws, and they're good for us, right? Wear a seatbelt so you don't die. We've had these COVID laws to protect lives. There are laws that are good that we should follow, right? The problem with Romans 13, however, it has one large assumption. That assumption being that the government is good. See, unfortunately, during World War II, this passage, Romans 13, was used to remind people that God appoints authorities, and therefore you should support the Nazi regime. I don't think anyone now would argue that that was God's appointing. This is when the conversation begins. Yes, I think as we should be law-abiding as citizens. We should, what we talked about yesterday, give to Caesar what is Caesar's, but as Paul says in verse 1, there's no authority except from God. God is the Alpha and Omega. So what happens then when God's law and the laws of our governance are at odds against each other, right? We go with God. And if you've been reading the whole book of Romans, you would see this logical flow that Paul is making. But the danger is when we take it out of context, friends. So, and he actually continues about the power of love following after this. So there's a flow happening here. So Christians should not be some lawless cell, always rebelling against the state. But when there are laws that are unjust, our government's not doing things that we as people of God and following God's teachings approve of, we should speak out. In fact, I would argue, in this country where we have free speech, doing so is being a good citizen. We're living out those callings that Paul's talking about. Our government is set up for the people, we the people, right? Therefore, being a good citizen is participating in government, is voting, is speaking out, is freedom of speech, is freedom of religion, all these things that we cherish in this country. Paul doesn't say follow blindly. That's not in there. In fact, we talk back to Luther, he talks about this passage, right, about submitting to authorities. His teachings was then used to slaughter the peasants in the peasants' revolt. And later he felt horrible about it. You've seen the movie Luther. He's much lamenting in that scene, right? We have to be careful with our language. Nothing can be absolute. Our relationship with the church and the state is not this strict rule book, but rather an ongoing conversation with ebbs and flows that is centered on our only authority, God. And so yes, Romans 13 is part of that conversation. We should follow the law. We follow God's law, and we follow the laws of our country. It's interesting with churches, we pay, the misnomer churches and pastors don't pay taxes. Trust me, we pay taxes. We don't pay taxes on certain things. It's a separation of church and state. Why? Because we're going to use that money for good, right? But we should use that privilege of separation of church and state for good, for proclaiming the good news, right? All nonprofits have the same tax benefits that we do, right? The idea is that it's a way to help. No nonprofits are rolling in the money. There's a reason that they're not taxed. I mean, we're going into other laws, right? That the church is still subject to almost every law in this country, right? And it should be. I hear people say, "Oh, separation church and state. The churches shouldn't be subject to employment laws." Yes, we should. It's part of. We believe that God teaches everyone's equal. Why wouldn't we be an equal opportunity employer? Anyway, I know I'm losing you on tangents all of a sudden here, but the point is the interaction with church and state should be dynamic. It should be, like I said, we work with them, they work with us. When we have issues, we inform each other. Like I said, the government works for us in this country. It's a beautiful gift. Paul didn't have that in Romans. The government wasn't working for the people. So let's use that privilege and freedom. And how to do that, we'll talk tomorrow.